Hello everyone, this is Rob and welcome to another tutorial for Visual Basic coding in the Visual Studio IDE. In this one we're just going to quickly look over how to declare different types of variables a little bit more, and we'll also cover how to use comments. So, there are many kinds of variables we can use. We can use booleans, which are true or false. We can use characters, which are essentially just different characters, so P, O, semicolon, 7, as long as it's a single character, it applies. We also have strings, which are a sequence of characters, so this can be plain text, we can have spaces in this, and other things like integers, which are whole numbers. So, let's recap how we declare a variable. Before we can use a variable, we have to declare it, and the keyword we use for this is dim. And after that, we want to name our variable, because our variable has three components: the name, the type, and the value. So the name of our variable, let's just call this testint. So if you can guess now, this is going to just be an integer variable that we will create. And we will then say as integer. This is a perfectly valid line for declaring an integer variable. However, if we do not give this an initial value, then this will default to a value of 0, because this is the default value of an integer in Visual Basic and most other programming languages. However, if we want to give it a new initial value, we just say equals and then the value we want. So let's give it a value of 10. Now integer means whole number, so we cannot have 10.2, and if we do this, if we give it something that is not a whole number, it will round down to the nearest whole number. So if I put in 10.2 here, when we actually use this integer, it would just be a value of 10. Even if it was 10.9, unlike maths, we do not round up ever, we always round down to the nearest whole with an integer. So this would still be 10. So let's just make that 10 for now. And we are also going to add a comment to explain this. Now the way we use comments is we start with an apostrophe, and then anything after this apostrophe is a comment, which means it will not actually be read as part of the code. This is just comments for our own benefits, so that we can understand what is happening in the code without having to decipher what the code is actually doing. We can write these comments in plain text, so we could just say this is how we declare an integer variable. And as you can see, we can have this on the same line as our integer variable declaration, and we can do this at the end of any line we want. So if we had something saying testint equals testint plus 2, we could then have an apostrophe after that as well. So if we review how this variable is constructed, we first start with the keyword dim, and then we give our variable a name, which is testint, then we type as, and then we have to declare the type of variable. So in this case it is an integer, and then optionally we can initialize this variable, which means that we give this variable a starting value chosen by us, as opposed to the default starting value. So now let's try declaring a boolean. So once again, same as before, we start with dim, and then we give it a name. I'm going to call it testbool as boolean. And once again, if we want to, we can give this a starting value. Let's make this false, because if you recall, a boolean holds either a true or false value. True or false are the only acceptable values for a boolean. And once again, we're going to add a comment to the end of this by using an apostrophe. So let's say this is how we declare a boolean variable. Okay, so now we have our boolean variable. Let's have a look at declaring a character variable. Okay, so let's have a look at declaring a character style variable. So once again, we will do this in the same way as we did with our integer and Boolean variables. So we start with dim to indicate that we are declaring the variable. We give it a name. I'm going to call it test character or test car as car. C-H-A-R. This is short for character, and many programming languages will shorten the word character to car when you have to reference them. This just saves you more typing. So that's happened. And now if we want to initialize our character, or if we want to at any point change the value of our character variable, we would need to use equals, and then inside quotation marks we put the character we want. So this could be the letter C, this could be the number 7, it could be a semicolon. It doesn't matter. Any character on your keyboard that you can type up is a character. Let's just leave that as semicolon for now. And once again, we'll write a comment to explain what's happening. This is how we declare a character variable. So these quotation marks are important. If we did not have these, our program immediately flags it as an error. There is a little blue squiggly line under there and it says character is not valid. So we need it with quotation marks either side. However, if we want to have more than one character stored, so we couldn't do this for example, it would actually only just go to the first character listed, so it would still be a semicolon, because a character could only store a single character. So if we want to store more than one, we have to use the string data type. So let's type dim test string as string. Now a string is plain text that can have multiple characters, it can include spaces, all these sorts of things. So we could say, hello, I am a string, and that would be perfectly acceptable as a value for our string. And a string can contain a very large amount of text. So once again, we add a comment. This is how we declare a string variable. Finally, let's look at declaring a double variable. So once again, we begin with dim. We give it a name. I'm going to call it test double, but you could call it anything you like so long as it has no spaces. And then we'll put as, and then double. Now a double variable type, unlike an integer, can store decimal places, and it can be very precise. It can store a large amount of digits. So we could say equals 32 point blah 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 blah, and our double will store that precise value for us. And that is what the double type is for. It is for storing very precise values, especially when you need a decimal point. However, it is still perfectly fine to use this for storing whole numbers if you so choose. Let's give this a comment. This is how we declare a double variable. And now at the top, let's just include a single line comment up here saying this is an explanation on how to declare variables. We can have comments as a line in their own right, and often this is a good idea if you're trying to introduce a block of code. So then we can say, okay, this comment probably corresponds to these variable declarations below here. And that is how we declare variables. So just remember, you start off with dim, you then give the name of the variable, you then type as to indicate that you're going to say what type of variable you're going to use, and then you input the type of variable, so that can be integer, boolean, char, string, double. There are plenty more than that, but these are some of the more common ones. And then optionally, you can initialize the value to something of your choosing. So we initialize the value of our integer to 10 here. So I hope that this has been useful to you guys. I hope you now understand better how to declare variables and what we can do with them and what the types are used for. And good luck in your studies.